Welcome back to the Making Browser Games series, part 18, and I apologize for not having posted in 3 weeks. I kind of got burnt out a little bit on the browser series, but that doesn't mean I want to quit it. I definitely want to continue it and get some serious games going. I just needed the break. But I'm really excited about today because today I'm going to be showing how to do graphics using HTML and using specifically the HTML canvas tag and a lot of JavaScript. And that's, I guess, one reason why I did kind of burn out on the last on this series because I was doing so many basics. Well, I've decided to move ahead a little bit sooner than I thought, and I'm going to be giving a graphics tutorial, which is going to be essential for making games. But before we start, you're going to need these things, or not that thing actually. You're going to need an index.html file, a style.css, a code.js file, and in fact, let me open up the folder where I have all my files. There we go. So in addition, you're going to need one image file. For me, this is just a random picture of Bonzi Buddy. It could be literally anything, but you're going to need your three code files, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and then you're going to need one image file. And that could be anything, but you'll have to assemble these first, or get these ready first. Now, inside of the style sheet is empty, the JavaScript is empty. Now the HTML has just this basic stuff here, the document type, the HTML tag, head, and body sections here. Now I'm going to do a quick review on how we're going to link this to the CSS page and the JavaScript page. For the CSS, inside the head, I can simply say link href is equal to style.css. That is the name of my file, followed by the file extension. And then I'm going to add rel equals style sheet. That stands for relationship, I believe. I actually don't know that for sure, but the relationship of this file to the rest of our document is it is a style sheet. Now JavaScript is a little bit simpler. At the end of the body here, I'm going to put source. Script. Source is equal to code.js. Once again, the name of my JavaScript file. And then I'm going to close that with a closing script tag. So with that, I have linked my CSS and my JavaScript to my HTML file here. Now, I'm going to show you guys how to do graphics with the Canvas window. What is Canvas? Well, Canvas is a tag in HTML that lets you draw on it using JavaScript. Now, let me show you specifically what that means. I could create any old window. I could use a div, which is just a divider, and add another div, a closing div here. And then under the CSS, I can say that for this div, I want its width to be 500 pixels, its height to be 500 pixels. I want its background color to be blue, and I want a black borderline around it. So I want its borderline to be 2 pixels of solid black, like that. And if I refresh the page, I just created a window. And in fact, we're going to create a window that looks identical to this. But the difference between the canvas window, which we're going to create, and just any old random div tag here, is the canvas will actually let us draw things on this window. So with that, let's get started by actually using canvas. I'm going to create the canvas tag, opening and closing, and I don't need any text in between. There's my canvas, and in fact, I'm going to use this exact same CSS. I'm going to change this to canvas. I'm going to keep its background color blue. I'm going to put, I like the black border line that's around it, but I'm going to take out this width and this height section. I'm going to replace those by putting them here in the HTML. Width equals 500, height equals 500. And now when I refresh the page, it looks the exact same, except now we're using a canvas, which is something we can legitimately draw on. Also, just the reason I moved the size code is because remember, CSS does not actually affect the real size of objects. This is just stylizing. So if I asked my canvas to be, if I said the width would be 500 pixels here, I'm not actually changing the size of the canvas. In a way, you can think of this as just stretching out the canvas. But to set its true size, you have to do that here in the HTML. Otherwise, you would get distorted images and rendering and things would be stretched out. I've had that issue before, and I'm going to save you the trouble. Just never stylize it here in Canvas. Let's just do it right here inside the HTML. So we've created a window that we can draw on. So now let's start drawing on it. I'm going to go to the JavaScript file. And first, we need to access the canvas tag. So var canvas is equal to document. And normally, I taught you guys document.get element by ID. And then we'd have some kind of ID in here. Like maybe I could have said ID equals canvas. And then for the code, canvas, like that. So this would give me access to the canvas HTML tag, but I want to show you guys instead, since this is a pretty useless ID that we never use again, so I'm actually going to get rid of it and show you what you can do instead. I can instead just ask for any tag with, I could ask for a list of all the canvas tags and then just use the first one. So instead, I'm going to do document.get elements, plural, by tag name canvas. What this does is this will give me a list of every canvas tag inside of my HTML. Now, since it's a list, I have to specify which one. Well, we only have one canvas in this list. So I'm going to, after this function, I'm going to type 2 brackets and a 0 in those brackets, followed by my semicolon. We have not covered lists in JavaScript, and we don't need to yet, but basically, lists always start with 0. Basically, that's how it is for every programming language I've used. Lists always start with 0. So 0 is actually the first item in the list, as confusing as that is. 1 would be the second item. So I'm saying, give me a list of all the canvas tags, and give me this, just the first one. So now we have the canvas. We need next, a context. Now, a context, I have no fancy way of explaining it, but it's simply something that we're drawing with. So we need the canvas in order to create a drawing context, but it's the context that's actually doing the drawing. So var context is equal to canvas.getContext2D, and that will give me my drawing context. Make sure this D is a lowercase because I'm pretty sure it won't run if it is an uppercase, though we can test that in a second. Now let's draw a square in the top left corner of the screen. And again, this is why Canvas is very important for video games if you're wanting to make browser games, because we cannot do that with normal HTML. I'm not going to create a bunch of divs and stylize them. This is using Canvas is the best way of rendering graphics for this web game. So I'm going to say, first, I want a red square or box, so I'm going to say context.fill style equals red. I am setting the coloring style that we're about to use. Now to draw the box, I'm going to say context.fill rect. That stands for fill the rectangle with this color. And this takes 4 arguments, x, y, width, and height. So I'm going to type 0, 0, and I want this to be 50 pixels wide and 50 pixels tall. And I'm going to run this, and this result might surprise some of you. I get a box right here. That's because, and let me explain this first. Some of you might have been expecting the box to be here in the middle of the screen because that's where 0, 0 is, right? Well, that's actually not the same. So some of you, I've prepared this drawing. This is your Cartesian coordinate system here on the left. This is your x and your y axis. And what we all learned in school was 0, 0 is this spot in the very middle. That is 0, 0. As x goes to the right, the x gets bigger. As we go to the left, x gets smaller. As we go up, the y gets bigger, and as we go down, the y gets smaller. So this over here on the left is what you guys are used to, but here on the right is how Canvas works. 0, 0 is actually here in the top left corner. As we go to the right, x gets bigger, that stays the same. But as we go down, y gets bigger. So the y-axis is flipped. So really the big changes are 1, 0, 0 is in the corner, not in the middle. And so when I ask the box to draw at 0, 0, it renders starting in the top left corner. And then then y moves down. So we're telling the box, okay, start at 0, 0, now go 50 pixels over and 50 down. So it draws a box in this area here. So just remember that the y-axis is flipped. And that's why when I put context.fillRect 0, 0, 50, 50, that starts us here and that ends us here. So that's why we have the box in the exact position that it appears. Let's draw another box next to it. Context.fillStyle, let's make this one yellow, yellow. Context.fillRect, I'm going to draw this at 70 in the X, so I'm just moving it slightly over to the right. 0, 50, 50, everything's the same. And now we have a yellow box that appears over to further to the right. Well, let's keep going, but this time I want to make a green box outline. Well, you can do that, but first I'm going to need to set the stroke style. Context.stroke style is equal to green. Canvas has two different ways of rendering. One is fill, the other is stroke. Fill is for filling solid shapes like this. Stroke is for doing outlines. So when I want to change the color and render a outline for a box, I'm going to use stroke and set the stroke style. I'm not going to set the fill style to green. That wouldn't do anything. So now I can say context.strokeRect. And let's start again even further to the right. So I'm going to add 60 to 70. And I'll add 130, 0, 50, 50. So I'm just drawing or outlining this box further to the right. And we get this green box here. It doesn't look very green. That's simply because of our background color of blue. If I were to take this out, then you can tell that it is very much green here. That's simply the colors not mixing very well. So let me put that back because I like our blue background. Which, by the way, alternatively, let's get rid of that in the CSS, and we can make the blue background in JavaScript. I can say context.fillStyle equals blue, and then context.fillRect, but this time I want to fill the entire screen. It's like I'm filling a rectangle the size of the entire screen. Here, I'm going to start here in the top corner and go down here. So that I'm going to start at 0, 0, but I'm going to go to canvas.width, canvas.height. Because if my canvas is 500 pixels wide, so a x of 500 would be over here, and my canvas is 500 pixels tall, so a y of 500 would be down here. So 0, 0, canvas.width, canvas.height, that's just 500, 500. I'm filling this entire screen. And we get the exact same thing as we did before, but without using unnecessary CSS. But make sure that you get the order right, because if I did this last, I would cover everything else. The order of the drawing does in fact matter. So let me put that back. We got our shapes. Now let's do something more interesting. I'm going to be showing you guys how to draw circles, lines, and images, and rectangles. So we've done rectangles. Now let's do circles. I want to draw a circle, let's say right here where my mouse is. So I'm just going to guess that, or I'm guessing that this is going to be, if this is 50 pixels, this is around maybe 75. This is x of 75 and a y of 200. So I want to draw a circle. And I'm going to draw the circle, context.stroke style equals I'm going to draw a circle outline, by the way. I want it to be cyan. Now I'm going to say context.arc. By the way, an arc is just this, very simple. This is an arc, but we're going to turn it into a circle by telling the arc to go from 0 to 360 degrees, which is most definitely not that shape that I just drew. So I set the new style for what our circle is going to look like. We want a cyan outline. We're not filling the circle. We're going to do cyan outline. Stroke style equals cyan. Context.arc. Now for arc, I'm going to specify where we start. So that's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be an x of 75 and a y of 200, something around this area. I want the radius, which is the next argument, I want the radius to be 40 pixels. And here's where we specify the angle. I want this arc to be exactly from 0 degrees to 360 degrees. But I have to do this in radians, so I'm going to say 0 math.pi times 2. And then I'm going to finish this off with context.stroke. And I'll see a circle here. But let me pause for a moment and explain what this means. So again, I wanted this arc, which is this is an arc, but I want it to start at 0 degrees and go all the way to 360 degrees, which is a full circle. But I cannot use the number 360 because Canvas deals in radians. If you don't know what radians are, then I suggest that you actually just ignore this part. But math.pi, pi times 2 is the same as 360 degrees. So 0 math.pi times 2, that is simply 0 to 360 degrees. Which, by the way, if I wanted half a circle, I would just do math.pi. I would multiply it by 2, and I'd get the bottom half of that circle there. But let me put that back. And in fact, let's also make the line a little bit thicker. So I'm going to say context.line width is equal to 4. And that's going to make it look much better. Now I can see the outline a little bit better. Now let's draw a solid circle further to the right. Context.fill style is equal to red. Do I want to? No, I want a purple circle. I'm going to do purple context.arc, and I'm going to do 175, 240, 0, math.pi times 2. Context.fill. And let's see what this gets us. Now notice something very interesting just happened. The second circle that we drew to the right is completely fine, but for some reason, the circle on the left has also filled with purple. And here's why. When you use the arc function or the line2 function, which we're going to use in a second, you are creating a path. You are creating a clear path on your screen for your context to be drawing, or for Canvas to be drawing. The thing is, even though we drew two circles, both of them together are considered one path. That's because we have not distinguished them as two separate paths. So when I say context.fill, that just fills whatever the path is. Since the path is currently falsely believed to be both of these circles, then purple gets filled for both of these circles. What I need to do is distinguish them as two separate paths so that we don't have that option or that problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that this second circle is a new path. So I'm going to say context.begin path. This is a brand new path. And when I run that, now we're only filling that second path there. This was one path. Now this circle is going to be a second path. Now there are circles. I'm going to leave comments here in the code. Rectangles, or actually they were squares. Squares, since we only drew squares. We have our circles here. Now let's talk about lines. Now, I want to draw a line to the middle of the screen. So I'm going to say, and let's change the stroke style, context.stroke style equals yellow. and I'm going to say context.line2. I want to draw a line from where we stopped, which by the way, we stopped right here. We drew a circle, so we're actually stopping right here, I believe. It could be, I could be wrong, it could be the middle, but somewhere near this circle, that's where we stopped. I want to pick it up and draw a line from our stopping point to the middle of the screen. And the middle of the screen is simply the width of the canvas divided by 2, and the height of the canvas, canvas dot height divided by 2. And let's see what this gives us. And again, if that's confusing, just remember, if this is my entire window here, and this is 500 pixels wide, 500 pixels tall, well, 250 pixels wide and 250 pixels tall would be right here, which is the exact middle of that screen here. So let me put this window back. I'm now drawing a line, a yellow line, from wherever we left off to the middle of the screen. And we get nothing because I always forget you have to say context.stroke. Just like how arc doesn't render anything until you say either stroke or fill, same with context. Or I mean, same with line. I have to say context.stroke. Okay, we get a line, but notice we get the same problem. We're now affecting the previous line we drew, the previous path. So I need to specify this as a new path. This is context.begin path, brand new path. I don't want the yellow line to have anything to do with the old circle. So let's refresh that. And it's not working. Context.begin path. What did I do wrong here? Fill style purple. I actually don't know what I did wrong there. Let's refresh it again. So it wants to do that. Let me just pause the video, figure this out. All right, so I have fixed this. Really, I don't know why this particular code is not working where I want to draw the line from the circle ending point to the middle of the screen and how begin path is kind of getting rid of that. But at least this will work. What you can do is begin the path, but also move the starting point of the line. That will fix this. So if I move the starting point of the line, context.move to 0, 0. I just moved the starting point of the line to 0, 0. Now we're going to draw a line from the top left corner to the middle of the screen. And if I refresh that, we're getting that working entirely. But begin path is still important here because if I got rid of begin path, it would once again try to apply that stroke to the arc that we did and add that yellow outline around the circle. So begin path is still needed here. I don't know why it wasn't working earlier, but when we move the starting point of the line, it renders just fine here. And I can draw another line. I'm going to begin another path, context.begin path. I'm going to move, actually let's set the stroke style again. Context.stroke style is, let's do magenta, and then context.move to, let's draw from the very top of the screen to the bottom. So I'm going to move to 300, 0, which is just further to the right, but still at the top. And then context.line to 300 to canvas.height. That will draw to the very bottom of the screen. Context.stroke. And boom, we get a magenta line from the top to the bottom. But let's see what happened if you forgot the begin path. Now let's run that. And what happens is when it changed the stroke, what happened was even though we set the stroke style to yellow, this stroke style overrode the first one because it's still thinking of this as one path. And in fact, it actually just drew over the yellow. The yellow was drawing there perfectly, but without a new path, we actually just drew over it since it thought there were two different paths. So if you ever get weird bugs like that, it probably has something to do with the paths. So that's all I want to show you with these graphics. Let me show you one final thing, and then this video will be over. I want to show how you can render your lovely Bonzi Butter, that's terrifying, Bonzi Buddy picture, or whatever image you have on the screen. So for that, I'm going to create an image, and I'm going to, and let me show you one way you could have done this. You could have said var image. Well, first create one in HTML. I just want to show you guys this. You could have drawn an image this way by typing image and then source is equal to bonzi.jpg or whatever your file name was, and then drawing that by saying image is equal to document.get elements by tag name image 0, getting the very first image tag we have. And then the context function is like this, context.drawImage. I want to draw this image. I want to start it in the very middle of the screen. So canvas.width divided by 2, canvas.height divided by 2. And I want it to be 100 pixels by 100 pixels. And if I do that, I have the image that rendered on the normal HTML page right here. But then I have the image on the canvas appear here. And in fact, I know that was probably a little rushed. I don't even think I taught how to add images to the HTML, but this is how you would do it if you didn't want to add it on canvas. And in fact, if you want, and this is what I often do when making browser games, I hide the image on the website so that I can just draw it here. And I do that using, let's find the image. I'm going to create a CSS rule for the image. And I'm going to say display none. I believe that works. Yes, display none. So now I just made it invisible, and the only one we get is on the screen. So that works. And in fact, that's what I've done most of the time. If you have a lot of images, then sometimes it helps to just put them in the HTML first and load them in this way. But let me show you how you can do this without even creating an image tag. So I'm going to delete the image tag and the image CSS. And instead, image is going to be equal to new image. So I'm going to create a new image object in JavaScript. And I'm going to set the source, image.source is equal to bonzi.jpg, just like what we had before. And now, let's see what this does. Well, notice on the I didn't save the HTML. Notice what happens here is now it's not drawing. Why isn't it drawing? We created the image right here, and we rendered it. We set the source. What's the problem? The problem is that this code ran too fast, and this image was not fully loaded before we could draw it. So what we're going to do is we're going to specify, we're going to kind of add a delay time. We're going to tell the image to only run this code once it has loaded. So I'm going to say image.onload is equal to function. So this function, this nameless function, is the command that's going to execute once the image loads. And what command do we want to execute? It's just going to be this line of code here. Like that. Now, notice the image does, in fact, render because we've given it enough time to load before trying to draw it. I have no clue how long this video has been, but thank you for watching, and I'm definitely glad to go through all the graphics, and I'm definitely excited for the next several videos we're going to do, which have to do a lot more with the game development that you guys have been looking for. So thank you for watching.